what Interpol, the International Criminal Police Organization, whose membership spans 195 countries, whose mandate encompasses the most serious categories of transnational criminal activity, whose Cybercrime division has been at the forefront of investigating and documenting the most sophisticated and most consequential digital crime operations affecting citizens across every nation on Earth, and whose public advisories carry the weight of direct investigative intelligence gathered through the coordinated work of law. Enforcement agencies across nearly every country in the world, giving Interpol's warnings about specific digital threats a credibility and an authority that no single national law enforcement agency, no single cybersecurity company, and no single academic research institution can match, because Interpol's intelligence is drawn from the aggregated investigative experience of law enforcement professionals across virtually every jurisdiction simultaneously, has just issued as a cyber alert to the global public about a specific mobile feature that citizens everywhere are being urged to disable. Today is not the kind of theoretical warning about hypothetical future threats that cybersecurity organizations sometimes issue to demonstrate their relevance and their awareness of emerging trends in the digital security landscape. It is a specific, evidence-based, operationally grounded advisory that reflects Interpol's direct knowledge of an active and currently ongoing criminal. Exploitation of a specific mobile feature that is affecting real victims in real countries with real financial, privacy, and personal safety consequences that Interpol's member law enforcement agencies are documenting in their investigations right now, and that prompted the issuance of a public cyber alert whose directness, whose specificity, and whose urgency reflect the genuine alarm that Interpol's cybercrime intelligence experts are feeling about the scale and the sophistication of the criminal exploitation of this specific feature that is driving ever-growing numbers of ordinary mobile phone users into the category of victims of technology-facilitated crime whose exploitation could have been prevented if they had known about and acted upon this specific advisory before the criminals who are exploiting this feature found their device, identified their vulnerability, and used it against them in ways whose consequences range from significant financial loss to severe privacy violation to genuine personal safety risk, depending on the specific criminal operation that the exploitation of this mobile feature enables, and that Interpol's investigations have documented across its member countries with increasing frequency and increasing concern. The mobile feature that Interpol's cyber alert is directing every mobile phone user to disable today. The specific capability built into modern smartphones, whose operation creates the security vulnerability that criminal actors across multiple countries are currently exploiting at scale against ordinary mobile users who have never been clearly warned. About what this feature does to their device's security and their personal safety is a feature whose existence on almost every modern smartphone is known to almost every smartphone user, whose basic function most people understand at a surface level, but whose specific security implications, whose specific exploitation mechanics, and whose specific connection to the criminal operations that Interpol's investigations have documented, most people have never been clearly and honestly informed about in the kind of specific, urgent, and actionable terms that would prompt them to take the protective action that Interpol is now explicitly and urgently recommending to every mobile user worldwide. The feature is NFC, Near Field Communication, the short-range wireless communication technology built into the vast majority of modern smartphones that enables the contactless payment functions that hundreds of millions of people use every day to tap their phones at payment terminals instead of inserting a card, that enables the quick device pairing and data transfer functions that allow two NFC-equipped devices to exchange information by briefly touching them together, that enables the reading of NFC tags embedded in products, posters, business cards, and a growing range of physical objects that can trigger specific device actions when the NFC-enabled phone is brought close to them. And that has become so seamlessly integrated into the daily digital life of hundreds of millions of smartphone users around the world that most people never think about it as a separate feature with its own security profile, its own attack surface, and its own specific vulnerabilities that the criminal actors who have been studying the NFC ecosystem have learned to exploit with increasing sophistication and increasing financial reward in a global criminal operation that Interpol's cyber alert is now bringing to the attention of every mobile phone user who needs to understand what NFC actually does to their device's security when it is left continuously enabled in the default state and that smartphone manufacturers ship their devices in. The NFC security vulnerability that Interpol's cyber's alert identifies as the foundation of the criminal exploitation. It has documented, is rooted in the fundamental design of the NFC technology and the way it has been implemented in consumer smartphones. Specifically the fact that when NFC is enabled on a smartphone, the device's NFC radio is continuously active and continuously scanning its immediate environment for NFC signals from other NFC-capable devices and from NFC tags. a scanning process that occurs automatically and continuously without requiring any user action, without requiring the user to open any application, without requiring the user to initiate any specific NFC interaction, and without providing any visible notification to the user that the NFC radio is actively scanning and potentially responding to NFC signals from unknown sources in the physical environment that the user is moving through during their normal daily activities. This continuous automatic NFC scanning creates an attack surface that sophisticated criminal actors have learned to exploit through multiple distinct attack vectors that each leverage the automatic response behavior of NFC-enabled devices in different ways to achieve different criminal objectives. Attack vectors that Interpol's investigations across its member countries have documented as being actively used against ordinary mobile users in physical spaces, including public transportation systems, shopping malls, restaurants, airports, tourist attractions, sports venues, and every other high-footfall public location where criminal actors can position themselves or their NFC attack equipment within the few centimeters to the few tens of centimeters that NFC's short range requires for successful signal interaction. The NFC relay attack, one of the most financially consequential and most technically sophisticated of the NFC-based criminal techniques that Interpol's Cyber Alert addresses, exploits the contactless payment capability of NFC-enabled smartphones by intercepting and relaying the NFC signals that the victim's phone exchanges with legitimate payment terminals, using specialized equipment to capture the NFC communication from the victim's phone and relay it to a remote accomplice or to a fraudulent payment terminal in a completely different location, allowing unauthorized transactions to be completed using the victim's phone's payment credentials without the victim being anywhere near the transaction location, and without any notification to the victim that their phone's contactless payment capability has been used to authorize a transaction they never intended and never consented to. The NFC eavesdropping attack exploits the radio frequency nature of NFC signals to intercept the data exchange between an NFC-enabled device and an NFC reader or tag during legitimate NFC interactions, including contactless payment transactions, creating an attack that is invisible to both the user and the legitimate terminal involved in the NFC interaction being eavesdropped upon, and that provides the eavesdropping criminal with the data exchanged during the interaction, including, in some cases, sensitive financial information that can be used for subsequent fraudulent transactions or identity theft operations that materialize days or weeks after the original eavesdropping event, making the connection between the NFC interaction that was eavesdropped and the fraud that it enabled difficult for victims to identify, and making the criminal operation that captured the data difficult for law enforcement to connect to the downstream fraud without the kind of sophisticated digital forensics that Interpol's cybercrime investigations have developed specifically to trace these attack chains. The malicious NFC tag attack, a criminal technique that Interpol's investigations have documented as being deployed in physical environments where the victims are likely to bring their NFC-enabled phones close to physical objects that the criminals have embedded with malicious NFC tags, exploits the automatic tag reading behavior of NFC-enabled smartphones to trigger device actions, including the opening of malicious web URLs, the initiation of file downloads, the execution of specific application functions, and, in some device configurations and some NFC implementation versions, even more direct device interactions, all without the victim being aware that their NFC-enabled phone has automatically read an NFC tag and taken an action in response to the data encoded in that tag. The physical environments where malicious NFC tags have been deployed in the criminal operations that Interpol's investigations have documented include public transit information displays, where passengers naturally bring their phones close to read information or scan QR codes, restaurant menus and table displays, where contactless ordering and payment have created expectations of phone proximity, product packaging and retail environments, where NFC tags for product authentication or supplemental information have become common, and tourist information points hotel, lobbies, event venues, and every other physical environment where the presence of legitimate NFC tags has created a cover within which malicious NFC tags can be embedded without arousing the suspicion of the users who interact with them. The SIM cloning and phone account takeover attacks that NFC vulnerability has been connected to in Interpol's investigations represent a more complex but extremely damaging category of NFC-facilitated criminal exploitation, in which the data captured through NFC attack techniques is combined with other criminally obtained personal information to enable the account takeover operations, the SIM swapping attacks, and the identity theft operations that can result in the complete takeover of the victim's mobile phone identity. And through that identity, the takeover of the financial accounts, the online accounts, and the personal digital life that the mobile phone identity is used to access and authenticate. the geographic distribution of the NFC-based criminal operations documented in Interpol's investigations reveals a criminal ecosystem that is truly global in its reach, and that is operating across every region of the world where high smartphone penetration rates, high contactless payment adoption, and high footfall public spaces create the concentration of vulnerable NFC-enabled devices that the criminal actors targeting these devices require to make their operations economically worthwhile and operationally efficient. A distribution that explains why Interpol, rather than any single national law enforcement agency, has taken the lead in issuing this cyber alert, because the criminal operations exploiting NFC are organized, coordinated, and operated across national boundaries in ways that require the international law enforcement coordination that only Interpol can provide at the scale and the comprehensiveness that the global nature of the NFC criminal ecosystem demands. The specific action that Interpol's cyber alert recommends to every mobile phone user, disabling NFC when it is not being actively used for a specific intended purpose, is an action of extraordinary simplicity that takes approximately 3 seconds to execute through the quick settings panel on virtually every modern Android device and iPhone, and that immediately and completely eliminates the attack surface that the continuously enabled NFC radio creates, because an NFC radio that is not active cannot be exploited by relay attacks, cannot be made to read malicious tags, cannot be eavesdropped through active NFC interaction exploitation, and cannot provide any of the other attack surfaces that the criminal operations documented in Interpol's investigations have been exploiting against the continuously active NFC radios of the millions of smartphone users who have never been told that NFC creates a security vulnerability when left enabled in the default continuous scanning state. The process of disabling NFC on Android devices requires accessing the quick settings panel by swiping down from the top of the screen, locating the NFC tile in the quick settings grid, and tapping it to toggle NFC off, a process that, on most Android devices, takes approximately 3 seconds, and that can be reversed in equally approximately 3 seconds when NFC is needed for a specific intended use, such as making a contactless payment or pairing a Bluetooth accessory through NFC, after which NFC should be disabled again immediately to return the device to the protected configuration that Interpol's cyber alert recommends as the default state for every mobile phone. The process of disabling NFC on iPhones follows a different path that reflects Apple's somewhat different implementation of NFC controls. On iPhone models that allow NFC to be disabled, which varies by iPhone model and iOS version, because Apple has progressively restricted the user's ability to disable NFC, as it has integrated NFC more deeply into iOS and Apple Pay functionality. The NFC settings are typically found in the Settings application under the NFC or Wallet and Apple Pay sections, with the availability of a disabling option depending on the specific iPhone model and the specific iOS version running on the device. The cases where NFC cannot be fully disabled on iPhone, a situation that affects certain iPhone models and certain iOS versions where Apple has not provided a user-accessible NFC disable option, represent a significant limitation of the protection that Interpol's cyber alert recommends, and that iPhone users in this situation should address through alternative protective measures, including the use of NFC blocking phone cases and wallet inserts that use Faraday cage principles to block NFC signals from reaching the device's NFC antenna, maintaining careful physical awareness of the objects and surfaces that their phone comes into proximity within public spaces to reduce the risk of malicious NFC tag interaction, and being particularly attentive to any unexpected device behavior, including unexpected URL openings, unexpected application launches, or unexpected notification appearances that might indicate that an NFC interaction has occurred without the user's awareness or intention. The additional protective measures that complement the NFC disabling recommendation, and that together create a comprehensive protection against the full spectrum of NFC-based criminal techniques documented in Interpol's investigations, include the regular review of contactless payment transaction histories on all payment accounts linked to mobile payment services to identify any unauthorized transactions that may indicate a successful NFC relay attack or another NFC-based payment fraud operation. The use of virtual card numbers for mobile payments where the payment service supports this feature, because virtual card numbers that are single-use or limited use provide a layer of transaction authorization control that makes relay attacks less consequential even when they succeed in initiating a transaction. The enabling of transaction notification alerts on all payment accounts so that any unauthorized transaction triggers an immediate notification that allows rapid detection and rapid reporting to the financial institution, and the maintenance of strong authentication for all payment applications, including biometric confirmation for individual transactions that adds an additional layer of authorization to NFC payment interactions that legitimate users must complete and that relay attacks must also defeat to complete unauthorized transactions. the broader context of Interpol's decision to issue this specific cyber alert about NFC at this specific time, the relationship between the alert and the current state of criminal NFC exploitation that Interpol's investigations are documenting, reflects the agency's assessment that the criminal ecosystem exploiting NFC vulnerabilities has reached a scale and a sophistication that demands a public advisory of the directness and the urgency that this cyber alert represents, because the combination of the growing prevalence of NFC-enabled devices, the increasing adoption of contactless payment, creating a larger and more financially valuable target population, the improving sophistication of the criminal tools and criminal techniques being used to exploit NFC, and the documented and growing volume of financial and privacy harm being caused to victims whose NFC-enabled devices have been exploited without their knowledge or consent, has collectively created a threat environment that Interpol considers severe enough and widespread enough to warrant a global public advisory rather than the lower-profile law enforcement advisories that are the normal channel for communicating emerging digital threat intelligence to national law enforcement agencies. Disable NFC on your mobile device today. Follow Interpol's specific and urgently issued cyber alert recommendation by accessing your device's quick settings and toggling NFC off within the next few minutes of finishing this video. Make the habit of enabling NFC only when you are actively using it for a specific intended purpose, and disabling it immediately after that purpose has been accomplished a permanent feature of how you manage your mobile devices. Wireless communication features implement the additional protective measures that address the full range of NFC-based threats that Interpol's investigations have documented. Share this Interpol cyber alert with every person in your life who carries an NFC-enabled smartphone and who deserves to know that the international law enforcement organization, whose mandate is to protect citizens from the most serious categories of transnational crime, has identified a specific mobile feature and a specific action to protect against it that every smartphone user needs to take today, and take seriously the source of this warning, because Interpol does not issue public cyber alerts without compelling evidence of active criminal exploitation at a scale and a sophistication that demands the most direct and most urgent public communication that the organization can provide to the hundreds of millions of smartphone users whose NFC-enabled devices are part of the criminal target population that this alert is designed to protect. Like this video, if this complete, detailed, and urgently actionable analysis of Interpol's cyber alert about the mobile NFC feature that every smartphone user needs to disable today gave you the understanding of what NFC actually does to your device's security when left continuously enabled, what specific criminal operations have been exploiting it in the ways Interpol's investigations have documented, what the exact steps are to disable it on your specific device, and what additional protective measures create the comprehensive protection against NFC-based criminal exploitation that Interpol's alert is calling every mobile user worldwide to implement before the next criminal actor in a public space within NFC range of your continuously enabled device adds you to the growing list of victims that prompted the issuance of this extraordinary international law enforcement cyber alert in the first place. Subscribe to this channel for the kind of seriously researched, internationally informed, and genuinely protective mobile security content that empowers ordinary smartphone users to respond effectively to the most credible and most authoritative digital security warnings that law enforcement organizations at the highest level of international coordination are issuing about the specific mobile features that are creating the specific vulnerabilities that the most sophisticated and most financially damaging criminal operations of the current digital crime era are actively exploiting against the billions of people who carry NFC-enabled smartphones and who deserve to know what that capability costs them in security every time they leave it enabled in the default state that their device shipped in and that no one ever clearly told them was creating an attack surface that international organized crime has learned to exploit at global scale. And tell me in the comments whether you knew that Interpol had issued a cyber alert about NFC specifically, whether you had NFC enabled continuously on your device before watching this video, and whether you disabled it immediately after understanding what Interpol's investigations have documented about the criminal exploitation of this specific mobile feature. See you in the next one.